Rusty's medicated bumper ointment. You know how many times I used to replay that commercial in my childhood? It was a very, very good commercial. And honestly, I apologize for y'all because there are going to be some noises in the background of this video. The garbage trucks are outside, the lawnmower guy's doing his thing. There's a lot of busy stuff going on here in a springtime in Vancouver. But what I wanted to do was talk not about Rusty's medicated bumper ointment, the Lightning McQueen sponsor that we all know and love, but talk about Rust itself. Rust itself? Nah, Rust himself. Because today, what we're doing is heading over to The Athletic and reading a piece published by Josh Yohei about Pittsburgh Penguins forward Bryan Rust. Because Bryan Rust right now is a 32-year-old forward on the Pens. He's signed on for $5.125 million a year, and his contract expires in 2027-2028. He's got a few extra years at a pretty reasonable cap hit for a guy who this season is on pace for a career high. The most points he has ever had in a season was 58. He got that in 21-22. This season he is on pace for 61 points in 71 games played. Now, sure, it's not technically a career high when you acknowledge that there were some years he had in the past that were over a point per game, but Bryan Rust has been a very solid contributing force to the Pittsburgh Penguins over the years. With Crosby, without Crosby, with whomever it is that he plays with, Bryan Rust has been one of these shots in the dark that turned out well, alongside of the Jake Gensels, the Connor Sherrys, and the... whom else was there that really stood out from the Pittsburgh development system over the years and allowed them to win multiple Stanley Cups? There were a bunch of guys, but Bryan Rust was one of the bigger ones. So now he's 32. He's no longer in that same young-ish age range where he was a brand new guy that helped the Penguins win 2 Stanley Cups. Now he's in a pretty tight spot. Because if you head over to this article published by Yohei on The Athletic from earlier yesterday, you'll figure out that there are some other teams that are really going out there and apparently targeting this guy. I'll leave a link in the description to, firstly, our ExpressVPN affiliate page. This show is brought to you by Express. Go out there and use that first link in the description to save some money on your VPN, get some free months, and support this YouTube channel in the process. But also linked in the description is this: what Josh Yohei is hearing about the Pittsburgh Penguins trade deadline execution and the future. Of course, The Athletic is paid for material. We're not going to go out there and screenshot this article directly. Instead, we are going over onto RedWingsInsider.com because Jack Sutherland published a piece that goes out there and quotes some of The Athletic content. And because this Red Wings Insider article is not behind a paywall, I'm just going to go out there and use this one. So both articles will be linked in the description. The Red Wings will be pursuing a 2-time Stanley Cup champion in the summer's free agency period. Interesting. Let's go out there and see what the article says. While there are a fair amount of Red Wings fans who would love to see the Red Wings acquire a Mitch Marner of the divisional foe Toronto Maple Leafs in what would be a major shift in the Atlantic, Josh Yohei of The Athletic indicates that the Red Wings could potentially have interest in Penguins forward Bryan Rust. Teams are going to call dubis in a hurry when July 1st arrives. Why? That's when Bryan Rust's no-movement clause expires. I don't believe the Penguins are interested in moving him, although it won't stop teams from calling. A Penguin source has indicated that the Columbus Blue Jackets and Detroit Red Wings are fans of Rust, which makes sense for their needs. What a wonderful addition he would be to a young team with talent. He's playing perhaps the best hockey of his career, he's a great leader, and you may have heard that he has scored a clutch goal or two in his day. And yeah, he has scored some pretty important goals for the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll just leave it at that. We don't need to glaze the guy too hard here. But Bryan Rust is a pretty good hockey player. And to hear that the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Red Wings are involved, or they're potentially interested in maybe seeing what he would be fetching on the market come July 1st, it does beg the question, are one of these teams going to be able to get it done? Can they acquire Bryan Rust? thinking about what Rust would be in either in either Detroit or Columbus, just think about an all-situations versatile kind of guy who can produce some pretty significant points. A guy who drives to the net, who's able to get into the dirty areas, who can win battles, and who can make some really nice plays. Rust has been very versatile over the past few years in Pittsburgh, and if the Red Wings are able to get this kind of a guy for their top six, then I'm not saying he's the one-stop shop solution to finding a winger for Raymond and Larkin, but he could very well be. In Columbus, earlier on in the season, that Voronkov, Monahan, Marchenko line was absolutely fire. They were so good. The only reason they're not fire anymore is because Monahan's been out for an extended amount of time. The rest of the lineup, though, they just got Igor Chinakhov back. They still have Adam Fantilli, Kent Johnson's doing this thing. There are young guys in Columbus that could very well benefit from the extended leadership of a guy like Bryan Rust. There are so many good qualities that this guy can bring on and off the ice that it's going to be very difficult to fully find a trade partner that Pittsburgh and Kyle Dubas would be willing to accept a package from. Unless the Red Wings were willing to package, firstly, you need to get a roster player in there just to get the roster spots all filled up. Or actually, I don't even know if you need to do that, to be honest, because if it's July 1st, then teams already have contracts that are expiring, and so you don't necessarily have the right numbers anyway. Okay, maybe you don't necessarily need a player, but if Pittsburgh wants to get younger, if they want to get guys that are kind of ready in the NHL right now to remain competitive whilst Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Karlsson are still there, then maybe it's just a matter of sending over a nice juicy prospect and a draft pick. Who really knows? I think for Columbus and Detroit, both of these teams are in that wildcard race right now. They are starting to make that transition into being more competitive over the years. Maybe there's not necessarily the biggest need in the world for these teams to hold on to their draft picks, right? I mean, Detroit was already named as the team that has the best prospect pool in the National Hockey League, so whether or not you put any stock into that, you could say, hey, either Stevie Y doesn't need to use any draft picks anymore, he's already got a pretty good prospect pool, or you can say that one of these guys, a surplus of a two-way versatile forward, could be dangled as trade bait for a guy like Bryan Rust. If the Pittsburgh Penguins just really believe in Michael Brandsegg-Newgard, and the Wings are like, okay, you could have him, here, we'll throw in a third and a second too. Maybe that's the kind of trade that works, who really knows? If the Penguins want defensemen, the Red Wings have Albert Johansson, they have Axel Sandin Pellikka, the Blue Jackets have Denton Matejchuk. There are a lot of younger guys that would move the needle here. And the question is that how much Bryan Rust's value would correspond on the trade market? So I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're a fan of the Blue Jackets and or the Red Wings, what are your thoughts on Pittsburgh Penguins forward Bryan Rust? Bryan Rust. It's kind of tough when you're really getting into that flow. What are your thoughts on Pittsburgh Penguins forward Bryan Rust? If you're a Penguins fan, what are your thoughts on what this guy should fetch on the trade market? Are you scared that he is going to get traded because his no-move protection expires on July 1st? Do you think there's a decent chance that by the time 25-26 rolls around, a whole bunch of the guys are out? Bryan Rust is on a new team, Ricard Raquel's on a new team. You're probably still going to have Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Karlsson for as long as those guys want to remain on the team, or for as long as a team is not willing to take on Erik Karlsson's contract at full value. But just based off of what we're talking about here, do you think some of these middle-aged guys can be on the move? Bryan Rust at 32 years old, he's not young anymore, folks. He's not young, and he could fetch a reasonable return because his cap hit is so nice. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99, and bye.